Good morning, everyone. Today we're checking out a brand new video from the film theaters. It's about how Zootopia was stolen. Oh, well, let's see what they're actually talking about.
Zootopia 2 is actually a retelling of some of the darkest parts of American history. And on top of that, it's a warning of the worst that may yet come. Hello Internet, welcome to Film Theory, the show that has a cool little fanny pack with the subscribe button right there inside. Want me to inject it right into your veins?
That's
I don't know
fine,
if you saw,
that's fine,
but
don't need it.
Zootopia 2 is absolutely cleaning up at the box office. Its opening weekend took home more than $500 million with a B dollars.
Whoa!
Was the best animated film opening ever and the fourth biggest opening for a movie, period. Seriously, we are nipping at Thanos' heels here.
Now that is an Avengers level threat.
And you know what? Well deserved.
Holy
It
crap.
was a really sweet movie. Kind of just the first movie again, but that's okay. With these sorts of sequels, you either have to do something completely different or just more of the same. Both are valid options. If you don't know, Zootopia is a series all about a city
all about
full of
execution,
talking
really.
animals, split up into several districts to best fit their needs. Savannah Central, Sahara Square, Tundra Town, and the Rainforest District. Our protagonists are
Why is the Rainforest District so damn big?
rabbit named Judy Hopps, who has become Zootopia's first rabbit police officer, and her partner, Nick Wilde, a fox con man turned cop. The pair saved the city and its minority of predator animals from a conspiracy to frame the predators as savage in the first movie. And Zootopia 2 expands the world of the first film, revealing that mammals aren't the only sentient animals walking around out there. Sure, fish may be food, but reptiles are a huge part of Zootopia, hidden in its nooks and crannies and thriving outside of the city itself. We're also introduced to a viper named Barry the Snake, and he's probably—
Is that really his last name? The Snake? The Snake? I think, oh my god, that name.
like my favorite character ever. He's just absolutely wholesome, and I loved his little fanny pack. Also, have to say that this movie directly addressed part of our last theory from a few weeks ago, explaining how the different districts weren't causing the terrible weather conditions that could lead to the destruction of the city. Apparently, they have something called a weather wall separating each of the districts, along with a climate wall that heats up Sahara Square and cools off Tundra Town. It's actually pretty central to the plot, but it's also not a physical thing we ever really see. Am I saying that these were pickups added at the last minute because of our video? No, but it makes you think. They weren't. It was definitely not a thing.
No.
But something else that makes you think: the fact that this movie is actually a giant retelling of a big part of American history. Yeah, if you look at the characters in this movie and the conspiracy they uncover, you'll realize that this looks awfully familiar to what you can find in a history book, especially in how Americans worked and were housed over the centuries. And scariest of all, it's actually a huge warning about the times we are currently living in. Yeah, I bet you didn't expect that one out of a movie with a sloth driving a sports car. So buckle up, loyal theorists, as we drive directly into this theory. So,
hold on. I spotted something just a second ago. Oh, right before I got that ad. Oh, wait, no, that's just a B company. Damn, I thought it was B&L.
So, because this movie is so new, I think it's best that we recap the broad strokes of the plot here so we all know what's going on going in. And obviously, because of that, spoilers ahead. Cool?
That's fine.
So, Zootopia 2 picks up pretty much exactly where we left off after Zootopia 1. Judy and Nick are now officially partners on the Zootopia police force, but early into their careers here, they go against orders and cause a giant mishap in a major case. Because of this, they're taken off of major duties and forced into what amounts to couples therapy. But Judy wants to continue her actual work, especially after finding evidence that a viper has re-entered Zootopia, the first reptile seen in decades. Reptiles had previously effectively been banished from Zootopia after a murder committed by another viper. So, of course, this raises concern.
Hold on. So, one snake does something bad, and they banish anything with scales? That is extremely racist. I mean, it would have been still racist if it was just snakes, but to ban all reptiles, that is extremely racist.
And worst of all, the viper is targeting the Lynxleys, the family that founded Zootopia and created the weather wall technology that lets the biomes coexist in harmony. But of course, this is a Disney film that needs conflict. Things can't be that simple, as Nick and Judy discover yet another conspiracy. After catching the viper, the Lynxleys order Nick and Judy to kill him, and they're framed for a crime they didn't commit to hide some dark secret when they refused to. After taking the viper, he turns out to be a pretty chill dude named Gary the Snake, who has returned to Zootopia to try to clear his family's name. See, his great-grandmother was the Viper accused of murder all those decades ago, and she was also the actual creator of the weather wall technology. Reptiles used to live in peace
I remember you actually talking about that in the previous theory about the wall.
with mammals in Zootopia, and even had their own district called Reptile Ravine. But the Lynxley's ancestors stole the Snake's technologies and patent while also framing her for the murder to discredit her. This led to discrimination against reptiles so severe that it eventually led all of them to either leave Zootopia or be forced underground into smaller neighborhoods like Marsh Market. The Lynxleys then used their newfound wealth and power to destroy Reptile Ravine, cover it in snow as they expanded Tundra Town, and turned the land into their own private estate. And now they want to do the exact same thing to another community, Marsh Market. But if Judy and Nick want to lay low while they're on the run, they're gonna need to do more than just smash their phones or change their names. Like, for real, I would be surprised if every website knows what they want to buy and is gonna serve them up some seriously targeted ads.
Well, this is
something that would be less of a problem with the partner for today's theory, Incognita. Thankfully, Judy and Nick learn to be better partners. They overcome their prejudices and learn to trust Gary, expose the Lynxleys and their nefarious plot, clear their names, change the hearts and minds of the people of the city, and welcome the reptiles back into Zootopia. Everyone has a big dance party over the end credits. Cue the post-credit scene teasing the inevitable third movie that will involve birds as yet another stand-in for a real-world group of people facing discrimination in the modern day.
Wow, hold on. Actually, not thinking about in the first movie, you don't ever see a reptile nor an avian. It's always some warm-blooded creature.
I guess would be
that gives live birth.
Native or indigenous peoples. So already, Zootopia 2 carries on a lot of what the first movie did by clearly using its characters as stand-ins for real-world groups of peoples and the relationships we all have between them. Just like the first film used mammal predators as a stand-in for Black or African-American communities, this movie has reptiles stand-in for many Latino or Asian communities. I mean, it doesn't really get much clearer when you have a basilisk named Jesus wearing a sombrero voiced by famous Mexican-American actor Danny Trejo. But where are we getting into the history lesson here? And what are the warnings? What's the evidence there? Well, piece of evidence number one, Zootopia wasn't built by who you think it was built by. This was the main conflict in Zootopia 2's plot, right? The Lynxleys are credited as the founders of Zootopia and the people responsible for building its most important structures, like the weather walls. But this is a lie. The Lynxleys were just taking credit for the work of other people, building up their own fame and fortune at the expense of the people who deserved that credit. Basically, they stole everything. Now, I'm sure that there are specific cases a lot like this in real life, but broadly speaking, important parts of cities or other areas in the country being created by people who don't necessarily get celebrated does have roots in real-world history. For instance, a lot of the big cities in the United States, particularly on the East Coast, were originally built by people who couldn't take advantage of those cities or even really live in them. New York City, Washington, D.C., and Charleston, South Carolina were all massive cities that used slave labor to build much of their landscape. People who were obviously not going to be able to freely live in those cities they just worked so hard to make. Now that is a very specific example, and Zootopia doesn't really show that as its specific problem. I mean, what do you know, a children's movie with a talking fox didn't explore the impacts of slavery. Surprise, surprise. So yeah, sure, some parallels might be there if you kinda squint. But the Snakes created the weather wall, a lot of technological infrastructure that helped Zootopia thrive. Is there something else in American history that looks more like that? I mean, come on, you know what channel you're on, and you know I wouldn't bring
Let me guess, the Transcontinental Railroad.
That up if I didn't.
That was a little difficult for me. Railroad.
Have an answer, and the answer is yes. In May of 1869, the Pacific Railroad, or America's first transcontinental railroad, was opened. And I cannot tell you how much of a game changer this was. Railroads were faster, safer, and way cheaper than other ways.
And yes, he is going to bring this up, but many of the people that actually did work on building this were indeed, well, Asians.
To get around back then. So being able to go from one side of America to the other or move goods from one coast to another, that was huge. And sadly, for over a century, a lot of the people who helped build the railroad were left forgotten. Immigrants from China. Now, don't get me wrong. Many Black, white, and Latino people worked on the Transcontinental Railroad, particularly Irish and German immigrants and former slaves freed after the Civil War. The work that they did and the pain they suffered because of it shouldn't be forgotten here either. But there were also a lot of Chinese immigrants that helped build the railway. Some estimates put that number between 15 and 20,000 Chinese workers, with up to 10,000 working at the same time. And this wasn't just hammering railroad spikes into the ground. Sometimes Chinese workers were put into hand-woven baskets, lowered into holes in the ground with explosives, lit the fuse, and were hopefully pulled back up before they exploded. Man, this
just drop
a
it?
dark time in history. Sadly, most of these Chinese workers were forgotten or ignored by history, and only in recent decades has a light been shined on their work and this huge part of American history. This is almost exactly what we see in Zootopia, with the backbone of Zootopia's infrastructure being created by the Disnakes, who seem to be stand-ins for similar Asian communities in the United States, given the casting of Ke Huy Quan as Gary. But this sort of work wasn't limited to the Chinese immigrants working on the Transcontinental Railroad either. From 1942 until 1964, the United States and Mexico worked together on the Puchero program, importing workers to keep railways moving and farms farming. They had terrible conditions, and the work of these Mexican laborers has largely been forgotten by history. Another parallel with the Latino-inspired reptiles in Zootopia. So that's laying the foundations of our comparison here. But what about something a bit more concrete when it comes to where people live? Something solid, like a building or neighborhood. Piece of evidence number 2, Zootopia shows us the impact of people being forced out of their neighborhoods. Now, in the last decade, you might have heard the word gentrification thrown around in the news.
I have heard of that,
yes. What does that actually mean? Well, it's a
The only thing I could actually even tell you about what that word means is that an area is becoming more white, as some people like to put it. And technically, it's not wrong, but it's also not completely correct, considering that anyone can use the facilities and shops put up there. It's just that most of the people and customers that go there just so happen to be white. You know, like a Starbucks here or a breakfast place over there where you can get avocado toast and all that kind of stuff that just seems white.
Very complicated topic, one that a video about a cartoon movie with talking animals is not going to really be able to do justice. I encourage you to do some reading and really dive into this issue that has impacted the lives of millions of real people and continues to impact them today. But for the toppest of top-level analyses here, well, the word comes from the old French word gentry, which described, quote, well-born, well-bred people. Jeez, that's not snooty at all. Basically, it's rich people. And gentrification is the process where a neighborhood full of regular people is slowly changed as richer people move into the area. The neighborhoods start to change. Houses get replaced, new stores open, and the prices for everything goes up. So much so that eventually the original people who lived there can't afford to anymore, even if they've been there their whole lives, and they're forced to leave. This has sadly happened all over the country, with one notable example being San Juan Hill in New York City. This was a neighborhood full of thousands of African American and Puerto Rican families bulldozed and replaced by the high-end Lincoln Center. Doesn't that sound a little familiar to what happened to Reptile Ravine? Obviously, it's more magical and cartoonish in Zootopia. The wealthy Linksleys used their hyper-advanced technology to move into Reptile Ravine and code it in an environment more suited to them than to the reptiles. They didn't use housing prices to gentrify the area, they used ice and snow. But the parallel does become a bit more clear when you realize that people have used nature to do this sort of thing in the real world, too. Communities like Enfield, Massachusetts, Kennett, California, and Elbow Woods, North Dakota are all now underwater.
Okay, I'm sorry. Elbow Woods, California? That is an interesting name, and I'm more curious about why it's called that.
Water because of the construction of dams made for wealthier nearby towns.
Damn.
And the most famous example of this, Coahuila, Alabama, takes things even further for our comparison because it was famously an African-American community before it was flooded, similar to the reptile minority here in Zootopia. Sadly, there are dozens and dozens of other examples I could point to with gentrification, but you get the idea.
Sucks.
And this
That's all
leads
it
us
is.
to evidence.
Humanity just sucks. Like, instead of us helping each other, It's always money, 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 money.
Point number 3, it's still happening, and it's happening again. So, according to a Stanford University report, minority neighborhoods, especially black neighborhoods, are affected far more than others by gentrification. But while it's true that minority communities are affected more than others, in the end, this is a problem that doesn't just affect one group of people. It can and will affect everyone, because money doesn't care if you're a snake or a bunny. Hear me out. I think it's interesting that the next target of the Linksleys in Zootopia 2 are the residents of the Marsh Market neighborhood. Yeah, the big plans they have in the movie, the conspiracy that Nick and Judy need to avert, is that the super wealthy Lynxes want to expand Tundra Town so that it covers up Marsh Market, exactly like they did to Reptile Ravine. This will inevitably force out all of the citizens that live there away from the area they grew up in, and that's best suited for them. People like the sea lions, walruses, dolphins, otters, beavers, and some of the remaining reptiles like iguanas, tortoises, and basilisks. And well, it's not a coincidence that the people here in Marsh Market are depicted in a very specific way.
Hey, bub.
Hey, bub.
Hey, bub.
Hey, bub.
Hey, bub. Hey.
Hey, bub.
They wear overalls and outdoorsy clothing. They have thick drawls and southern accents. Freaking banjos and harmonicas sometimes play when they first show up. Let me tell you, as someone raised in the Appalachian Mountains of South Carolina, these are my people. If predators represent African Americans and reptiles represent Latino and Asian communities, then the mammals here in Marsh Market are very much supposed to be people from rural communities in the southern and midwestern United States. And that
never mind. I was about to say something, but I probably shouldn't.
Can tell you a lot about their role in the themes here in Zootopia. See, sadly, the American South has the highest poverty rate in the United States. In the late 2010s, almost 20% of people living in the South were in poverty. That's basically 1 out of every 5 people struggling hard to find ends meet. And of everyone who was both living in rural areas and in poverty, over half of them were in the South. And these sorts of people are just as much in danger of being taken advantage of by rich people, whether they mean to or not. Yeah, according to a 2005 paper by the Housing Assistance Council, this happens more than you might expect, and for a variety of reasons. For example, cities can expand into rural areas, like what happened in Chester County, Pennsylvania. The eastern edge of Chester is close to Philadelphia, so as that city grows, more people from the city move into Chester, and as a result, some people are forced or priced out. Something similar is happening in Teton County,
look at Delaware, though.
This area is close to a lot of scenic forests and mountains, so people with a lot of money will move here for the natural beauty, which has priced many longtime residents out of the county. And as a third and final example, wealthy older folks have been moving to Beaufort County, South Carolina as they've retired. That last one actually hits really close to home because I have family and friends in Beaufort and spent a lot of time close to this area while I was growing up in Hilton Head and Edisto. And I can say firsthand just how much this area has continued to change over the last 20 years after this report. It's gotten way more obvious. If the Linksleys get their way, this is exactly the sort of thing that's going to happen to Zootopia 2, as the people of Marsh Market are forced out of their homes. They don't care who they hurt because they are so wealthy and powerful, as long as they continue to get their way and get more land, more territory. Like, there's a point in the movie where one of the Linksleys has been confronted by the fact that the people of Marsh Market are going to be hurt and displaced by expanding Tundra Town. And what does he say? Waterfolk, like foxes, are lesser mammals. Zootopia,
that's a little... Wow, that was racist.
Drawing this comparison for us. It's saying that money doesn't care who you are when it wants what you have. And loyal theorists, if we take the message of this movie just one step further, Zootopia is saying that this is going to affect you too. Yes, you there at home watching this in your underwear. Another line in this movie says that the Linksleys are territorial animals and that they always want more and more land. And while we tend to think about all this stuff involving gentrification as stuff that's happened in the past, it's happening right now. Sure, sometimes it takes the exact same form as the past, with rich people moving into poor neighborhoods and changing them. But in a modern lens, it's also happening with technology. I mean, if you haven't heard, AI data centers are being built all over the country, and according to several reports, wherever they go, they use millions of gallons of water, eat up and overwork the local electrical grid, and then pollute and change the environment. This causes the prices for locals to go up and could force them to leave, all for the benefit of someone who isn't even from there, who isn't even physically there. But just like Zootopia showed us that we can stand up against that, you can stand up for your community too. Man, you know, the more I've thought about it, this comparison is so one-to-one. Maybe the birds in Zootopia 3 are just gonna be AI tech bros. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next.
Alright everyone, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all of you next time when we flick back on. Till then, this is Fox, signing out. Peace.